We want to encourage everyone throughout this presentation to be interactive with us. So we're going to ask you questions. And so we encourage you to unmute yourself and be part of this very important conversation. So at this time, we're going to show a short video from a TV show that some of you may have seen. It's called What Would You Do? So at this time, we're going to show a video. If you could please make sure to mute yourself so that this way everybody has an opportunity to hear the video only.
How's that working? Is everybody seeing this?
Yep.
Great. So I'll just play this. It's about 7 minutes. And hopefully we won't have any technical issues.
Your way to work. Now watch. You're walking down the sidewalk on your way to work. Now watch that woman in front of you. Suddenly, she collapses. What would you do? Before you answer, take a look at this real security camera footage that caused public outrage last year. Disturbing video emerging tonight when this woman in a New York waiting room collapses in 2008. Hospital staff ignore her for an agonizing 45 minutes. When someone finally comes to her aid, it's too late. But aren't we better than that? Wouldn't the average person step in to help? We decide to find out. It's rush hour on a busy street in Newark as commuters head to the train station. This woman falls hard. But don't be alarmed, it's veteran stunt woman Stephanie Stokes-Smythe. And our What Would You Do cameras are here to see what happens next. And sure enough, some people walk right by. But within just 4 seconds,
Hello, you all right?
Good Samaritan Diane Coward stops to call 911. All day long, when it comes to Stephanie, the good people of Newark are up to any challenge.
Okay.
Time after time.
Stay right there. He'll be coming, okay?
But before we
He's watching football right now. Would you be able to call back a little later?
We wondered,
Okay.
what if instead
All right.
of this well-dressed
Thank
woman,
Sure.
we substituted this homeless man? Now, no one is so eager to step in to help stuntman Mick O'Rourke. This woman takes a good long look, but keeps on going.
He's a human being and he needs help.
But you didn't stop.
Because what can I do? Sir, are you okay?
But eventually, others do step forward.
Sir, are you okay?
And if they didn't always want to touch, many were willing to touch 3 buttons.
911, where's your emergency?
A man fell out. I don't know if he's dead or alive or what. The guy just laying on the ground. I don't know if he's okay.
How you doing, sir? When we asked them later why they helped, they all had similar answers.
You gotta help them. They need help, help them. Just reach out. What if it was you? What if it was me? I need somebody to help me.
But facts are facts. In our experiment, Stephanie is always helped within 6 seconds. With Mick, it takes an average of 3 minutes. Still, that's better than what happened in Washington, D.C. just last month.
What's more disturbing is the number of people who walked by the injured man and never stopped to help.
After this homeless man is attacked, hitting his head on the car behind him, he lies on the street unaided. People stop to look. They go by, even load their groceries. But it takes 19 minutes before someone finally calls 911. By then, it's too late. The man dies of his injuries. But would he have been treated differently if he hadn't been homeless?
The homeless are probably one of the most negatively stereotyped groups in our society.
Jack DeVidio, a social psychologist at Yale University.
And God forbid they're holding a beer can.
If they're holding a beer can, it gives us the explanation, the excuse not to get involved and still believe we're the good people in the situation.
And that certainly seemed to be the case when Mick fell once more, this time carrying alcohol. We waited.
A beautiful view of New Jersey.
And waited.
Hello? Let's wake him up. What is he doing? What is he dead?
And waited. In all, 88 people go by, and we're beginning to think no one will ever step up to the plate. But then we meet this most extraordinary woman.
Excuse me. Excuse me.
Linda Hamilton, who police tell us is sometimes homeless herself.
Excuse me. Can somebody call this man the ambulance? Excuse me. Could you call him the ambulance?
A lone voice asking for help. But unbelievably, 26 more people walk by, ignoring her.
That beautiful face of hers, shaking somberly.
What she can see is people being callous and uncaring, the cruelty in the world that there's kind of sadness there.
Hey, could you call an ambulance for this man? Could you call an ambulance?
Finally, Linda Hamilton's courageous example turns the tide.
911, where's your emergency?
Hi, I'm a passerby, but there's a man out on the street. He's passed out.
When we speak to Good Samaritan Batul Phillisman later, incredibly enough, she says she stopped because she remembered that videotape from Washington.
I didn't want the same thing to happen to this gentleman.
Once she steps in, others do too. This man improvises a pillow.
Hey, open your eyes. Still here.
She gave the homeless man a name. She said, I'll call you Billy. And she tried to comfort him. The actor playing the homeless guy was so touched. He said, I felt like she was an angel.
And she was an angel.
Hey.
By giving him the name Billy, she really created a personal connection. She had a bond with that person that nobody else was even willing to consider.
Open your eyes.
Even after our cameras come out, Linda Hamilton is still looking out for him.
You all right?
Yeah, all right. Oh, thank you.
Don't worry about it. Don't worry.
Amidst the hubbub of getting releases signed and interviewing passersby, our savior, Linda Hamilton, slowly taps her way down the street, reminding us, inviting us all to consider, just for a moment, what would you do?
Okay, are we unmuted? Did we go back to normal view? Can everybody hear me?
Oh, Jodi. Oh, this is cute. Wait.
Are we all back?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Okay. Angelique, I'm going to read the story. Where'd she go?
Now I'm going to get muted again.
Hold on one second. I'm sorry. Hold on one second. I'm sorry. I think we lost Angelique. All right. Until she gets back in, I will have her read the story when she gets back in. Let me see. I need to make sure our tech, oh, there she is.
I was gone.
I know. Where'd you go?
I don't know. I went into the ether somewhere.
Well, welcome back.
I'm so glad to be back.
Me too. I'm glad you're back too.
Yeah.
All right.
What did I miss?
Nothing. I was just waiting for you. Actually, I was going to go on into the question, but since you're back, you want to read the story?
Yeah, we wanted to give you a couple of different examples. And I normally, as I said before, I'm a literature professor. So the way that I come at understanding bystander intervention is through stories. And so this story that I teach in my Holocaust Lit course is about a Jewish family, and they live in Chicago. They own a newspaper stand and in a very busy spot right near some factories. And the young son, Harry, and his sister, Sylvia, they get picked on a lot by a group of teenagers. And one day the teenagers decide to come to the newsstand and sort of tear it up. So there's a father, there's a son, there's a daughter. And I'm just going to read you a little bit of it because the scene is very similar to this video that we just played. So it's from the point of view of the son. He's about 10. Then while they had me down on the sidewalk, Sylvia came running up the street. When she saw what was happening, she began kicking them and yelling, trying to make them let me up, but they didn't pay any attention to her, merely pushing her away. Please, my pa kept saying, please let him up. He didn't hurt you. I don't want to call the police. Then Sylvia turned to the people who were watching and yelled at them, why don't you help us? What are you standing there for? But none of them moved. Then Sylvia began to scream, listen, why don't you help us? Why don't you make them stop picking on us? We're human beings just the same as you. But the people stood there afraid to do a thing. Then while a few guys held me, Ghoulie, and 4 others went for the stand, turning it over and mussing and stomping on all the newspapers they could find. Sylvia started to scratch them, so they hit her. Then I broke away to help her, and then they started socking me too. My father tried to reach me, but 3 guys kept him away. 4 guys got me down and started kicking me. And all the time, my father was begging them to let me up. And Sylvia was screaming at all of the people passing by to help. And while I was down, my face was squeezed against some papers on the sidewalk, telling about Austria. And I guess I just went nuts because they just kept hitting me. And I kept seeing those headlines against my nose. And then the cops come, or somebody screams the cops, and the kids run. So those are the 2 essentially scenarios.
So after thinking about those scenarios and kind of reflecting on both of them, we have a couple questions for you that hopefully you'll help us to participate in a meaningful conversation. So the first question.
But let me just say this. This is a great time, unless you've got a lot of craziness in your background, dogs barking and noise. Yeah. This is a great time for you to unmute. You know, I like to try to make sure that we're as dynamic as possible, like we're in a room, and, you know, so you don't feel like you have to raise your hand or whatever. If you want to say something, say it. And hopefully, you know, if there's 2 people talking, one will let the other talk. So we can just make it as dynamic as possible. And if you prefer not to talk at all, there's a chat screen. You can type a question in.
Okay. So.
Okay.
There you go. So after viewing and reflecting on this, how many of you think that you would intervene in an event like this, one of those scenarios, where someone needed help? How many of you think that you would intervene? Yes, hands are up. Okay.
That's a lot of hands.
It is a lot of hands. It is. So does anyone want to share why you would intervene? Or how you might intervene? Share a story?
Yeah, if you have a cell phone, you really can get yourself out of danger, and you don't even have to give your name. You can call 911 if you think there's a danger.
Okay. Anybody else?
I think similar to what a woman or man said, I think it was a man actually, said this could this could be you. This, you know, you can imagine that this would happen to you, and what would you want someone to do if you were lying there?
Yeah. Yep.
So I think the question is not why would you intervene? Why would you not intervene? Is more the important question. And it seems to me intuitively that the biggest reason is fear for your own safety. And other than that, I can't think of any reason why people wouldn't intervene. And often, as Sheila said, because we have cell phones now, fear for your safety can be kind of washed away. But why would you not is the bigger question to me.
You're right, absolutely right. And that is our next question. I think, you know, the reason why we start with that question is because, well, my sense is that in this room, almost everybody's going to say, yes, why, yes, that's me. I'm the one who's going to intervene. But I would guess this because I've had the opportunity to have hundreds of students in my classes over the years who also believe that they would intervene, who believe that they are good people. And when something bad happens in front of us, we would do the good thing. You know, but why are we here then? If that's the case, you know, what then? Why then do all the bad things happen? If in general we are good people, and history tells us that we are more likely not to intervene. So Linda, your question leads us to our very next question. Jodi, did you want to ask that, or does it?
So why do you think people don't intervene? Absolutely, Linda. That was the question. That's our next question. You know, I mean, just because we have a cell phone, sometimes I think when we think about the situation, or you know, what if I was walking with my 2-year-old daughter and I felt unsafe? Maybe I wouldn't intervene. But why do you feel most people don't intervene?
This is Heather. I'm one of the participants here. I am a teacher of movement, and I find that the biggest fear actually can be a fear of embarrassment. So if you're rejected or they yell at you or something like that, that will make somebody not enter in or try something new. So I think it's getting past that and seeing that person as somebody's daughter or son is how I think about what if that was my son, like that one guy that had passed out. I can't pass because some mother or sister somewhere, their heart is aching, and how can I not? But yeah.
So essentially what you're saying is one of the reasons, you gave 2 reasons. The first reason why people don't intervene, one is embarrassment, and 2 is maybe the people who aren't intervening don't see the person in trouble as a connection, as a relative or somebody they love. I'm writing these down in my Word, and maybe I'll share them at the end so that we have them all. Anybody else?
I think one of them is time. We're all so caught up and busy that to take that time, generally speaking, it's not just going to be you make the phone call and get to walk away. They usually tell you to stay with the person. So I think that is a big factor, especially nowadays where everybody's in such a hurry and such a rush. And I think the interesting piece too is the judgment, because with the numbers of people that were passing by somebody because they had a beer can with them, you're passing a judgment on that person, and maybe they don't seem as important. You know, I think it's unfortunate, but I think we as humans automatically pass judgment on people. And you might see that person as dirty, or what if they're going to throw up on me, or, you know, I think that definitely complicates it as well.
Yes.
Yeah,
and
I agree.
in the chat, I just want to make sure we cover some of the voices that are in the chat. So fear of safety, threat of violence, and someone said because it is easier. Yet think about calling 911 if the person on the ground is having a mental crisis and is hitting or spitting, and that person is a person of color. Maybe it isn't 911, but crisis services. So maybe calling a different number.
And I think of intervening not just in an incident, the two that you described, but sort of like intervening if I hear someone make a racist remark against someone. And it's totally like the fear of like, if I respond and say to the person that made the remark, how is that going to affect my relationship with that person if I have a relationship with them? How am I going to be judged? Am I going to be ostracized if it's from a friendship group or a family group? So I know those are some of the big things that I'm trying to struggle to overcome because I really want it. I don't want it to be an elephant in the room that's not spoken. And so that to me is very important.
Barb, you make a great point, and I just want to make sure that we do sort of think of other instances, not just these two, but even small moments where you're in a room and somebody's performing microaggressions, and you have the opportunity to intervene. And so, just again, in any of those situations, what other reasons might we not intervene?
We're living in an age of mind your own business. It's really not my business. I've got other things to think about, and somebody else will do it. So I can just move right on. But I think that one thing I want to mention is that this happened in the New York, New Jersey area, which is a little bit different. Rochester has been called a kind city. And there were lots of experiments about Rochesterians who tend to help a little bit more. One of the famous ones was somebody who dropped a wallet in many, many different cities, and people picked up the wallet and put it in their pocket. Whereas in Rochester, they tapped the person on the shoulder and said, "You dropped your wallet." So I think we tend to intervene a little bit more than other people do.
I would like to say
somebody mentioned judgment, the judgment that you make, and maybe the judgment of the worthiness of the person. This is very specific to the video that we saw, but it makes me wonder if that experiment was conducted and you put a beer can in the hand of that beautiful blonde, very well-dressed woman with a beer can in her hand versus the homeless man with a beer can. I think that part of the ability to pass by the homeless man with a beer can is this sense of, well, he's a drunk and he's not worthy of my doing anything. Not consciously, but subconsciously. But put a beer can in the hand of that other woman, I wonder what would have happened.
I think too, when you see something as great an injustice as somebody on the street, that's one extreme. But I think what I see on a regular basis are the microaggressions, especially in an in-group. So as a fundraiser, if I'm in an in-group in the Jewish community and I hear microaggressions or something that's disparaging against an out-group, then it can be very uncomfortable to say something or to practice, in the case of racism, anti-racism, because there's always power at play in the situation, and there's also position. So it gets complicated. And so sometimes it doesn't feel safe to say something, and you're like, well, it's an in-group. I'm going to let that pass because I got to preserve the relationship. And I think that's where I came to this session, because that's where I struggle as is in when to remain silent, whether it's a family member or whether it's on Facebook, when you say, well, we're going to agree to disagree when something is profoundly unjust. So I think it's real easy when it's black and white to say that you'll do something. But I think on a day-to-day basis, that's naive. I feel that I've not said something when it's been appropriate to, and I seek guidance on how to stand up, and even if it's a small way, to let somebody know that it's not okay, even if I can't argue against their views.
Yeah, yes, absolutely. I wanted to go back to something Linda had said, and I forgot now. In groups and, oh, that was you, in groups and out groups. Yes, it is kind of naive to say, I'm a good person, I will intervene because I'm a good person. Because we find that we have a list going. I'm going to just cut and paste it into the um, into the comments, just so you can see what we have so far. But this is essentially a small list. When you really start to add up the costs of intervening, they are huge. Whether it's something micro on this edge of the spectrum where we're dealing with microaggressions in groups and out groups, or serious violence to individuals, or violence to small groups, or even on a much bigger scale, violence to whole groups, masses of people over a period of time, very much like what we're seeing now in our country. And so when we look at those reasons why we don't intervene, we see that there are so many of them. What happens when we come upon a moment, an action, is a sort of cost-benefit analysis. And that happens back here. It's not necessarily conscious, because it has to happen over a period of seconds. We decide whether or not we intervene. And whatever we have here, mental crisis, we have perceptions of safety, we have perceptions of innocence, we have judgments about the people, we have all of this, all these hundreds of years or years of social conditioning, we have systemic racism, systemic, all of the isms. So when you look at it, the costs to intervening almost always outweigh the benefits of intervening. And this is why we ask the question, why does history tell us we're more likely not to intervene when we come upon a situation, whether it's a microaggression here or something on the other side of the spectrum? And how can we recognize these mechanics of intervention when we're making those decisions, when we're in those places? But I think really the most important part is understanding that there's a cost-benefit analysis. So there's a question when we talk about bystanders, when we talk about you know that there's an event happening and you're standing there. How do we define the bystander? How do we understand, or how do we, who's culpable? So in the end, if that person gets hurt, who's culpable for it? Are those bystanders who were standing there and could have intervened culpable for what happened?
I have a couple of thoughts. I'm unmuted. Yeah, I think that two things is certainly what they saw in Germany is that often people who themselves had suffered or who had very few resources themselves were the ones that were able to stand up and be the righteous Gentiles. Either they had a sense of what it was like to be oppressed and knew that, as others have said, that it could happen to, it had happened to them, it had happened to their people, so they would stand up. So I think that's one, and often it's people who have less, look at that movie, with fewer resources, somehow able to have that empathy, and that was something in the culture of that person. So the second thing I would say is that culture is a big thing. If you're we see it in a classroom, or if you have a leader who is promoting empathy and caring for one another and a sense of community, and we've seen that even there have been groups in this last week that this is about caring for one another. Yes. That makes a huge difference. And it can be the culture of a country, the culture of a town, the culture of a suburb, the culture of a classroom. But it's up to leaders also to promote a sense of we care about each other, and that's a value here, and that's rewarded.
I guess the question, in the absence of that, in the absence of the strong leaders who are promoting whatever sort of well-being and empathetic ideology, what is it that we as, as citizens can do? How do we overcome? I see some questions in here.
Yeah, I was just looking at some of the chat, and a lot of the chat some of the responses are all about how we feel, people feel disconnected. And in the video, one of the things that struck me the most was when Linda Hamilton personalized the man and named him. And I feel that what I see in a lot of the chat now is how we can try to empathize. And so Joyce, that was a really good point. We need leaders, we need people to practice more empathy so that we feel more connected and then we feel less fear.
And it could even be with somebody who's standing next to you and saying, let's do this. We could do this.
Yeah. Cecilia?
Well, I think, and this is kind of a strange thing in some ways, that maybe this whole COVID situation is going to help us with this, because there are a few of us on the street. We notice each other. We have more time on our hands. We have cell phones.
Some have more.
I think maybe there's opportunity here for
it's everyone's kind of, it's interesting because people speak from their own experience. And
Go ahead, I'm sorry, I just muted him. Go ahead, Cecilia.
Okay, so I mean, I know that where we live here in Rochester on East Avenue, in an apartment building, we go outside and we meet all kinds of people. Everybody steps away to give you space and so forth and so on. But we've also run into a situation, there was a man that was screaming in the middle of the street. And clearly something was wrong. It was a mental health issue of some sort. This was a few months ago. And we were able to call 911, but we stayed there because we had the time to do that. And we stayed there to make sure that somebody came and that he was being taken care of. But before I retired, when there were lots of people on the street and everything else, I might pick up my cell phone and call somebody, but I didn't have the time like that Angel did to stay and do something.
Yeah, I feel like this goes so fast. We're like 5 minutes away from being done here. I want to say something. There's this, I believe this. I believe this. This is personal bias, my own bias. I believe that we, in general, are good people, and that we believe that we have a moral center that will right us in the wrong situation. But we've learned through history that our moral centers are rarely strong enough to right us in the bad situation. They are rarely strong enough. In fact, our moral center sometimes is the weakest part of our ability to make a difference. There are all kinds of other powers that sometimes are greater. The power of the government, the power of authority, the power of the situation. There's all kinds of other powers that sort of take over here. The power of fear, the power of perception, the power of insight. All of those other things often tend to be stronger than our own moral center. And so, the questions that we should be asking are, how do I stop relying upon, this belief that I will do good in a hard situation, and find a way to learn how to intervene in ways that don't seem so, I don't want to intervene because I'm going to ruin my pretty face. I'm going to get hurt. I don't want to, so that's really what we should be thinking about.
So Angelique, would it be, well, you said it's sort of, we do a cost benefit assessment. So would it be a way that we can sort of think about how we could increase the benefits and decrease the costs, right? So I'm thinking, well, you know, like when I respond to a racist remark, the elephant's already there in the room. So it's not as big of a cost as I fear to speak it. And in fact, it might provide some relief, right? And then so that's decreasing the cost. And then a way I could think about I'm increasing the benefit is at least I'm living in my integrity if it's taken the wrong way.
Yeah.
Is that what you're thinking about?
Say that again. It's taken from your integrity.
It's at least I'm living within my integrity if I speak out about it. You know?
Yeah.
If that's the reason that you're using, and if that's working. Jodi, did you?
And sometimes other people in the room may be thinking the same thing and want to say it, but they don't know how to say it. You may say it in a different way that kind of brings the conversation to light, and other people might feel the same way, and then the conversation might lead to a very healthy conversation where people will have a better understanding of where you're coming from because they're also thinking it.
I just want to note some of these comments in here from Jen. All the more reason to live in less segregated communities. When we know people as our friends and neighbors, we are less likely to see people as other. Yes, absolutely. And Lori, from another training, your body won't go where your mind hasn't been. We have to envision ourselves being the one to step in, to step up. Then we'll do it when the time comes. We hope that we'll do it when the time comes. You know, the questions are complex. I mean, it's complicated. It's, you know, somebody said it's naive to think we'll do the good thing or we won't do it. You know, after when you're in the situation, it becomes, sometimes it's not so black and white. Sometimes there's all these other questions that are connected to it, which make the decision even harder to make. And in the end, it's not, sometimes it's not clear. What is the right decision here? Or have you been in a conversation? Somebody just told me this the other day, that she was in a conversation with somebody, and somebody had said something that it was a microaggression she thought was racist. And, you know, in the conversation, she said, I asked myself, what did they just say? It wasn't until later, you know, until a couple hours later when she said to somebody else in the meeting, did that person say blah, blah, blah? And but, you know, I didn't know what to do. And then I felt bad. I felt like I should have done something about it. And, you know, if you listen to people like Ibram Kendi, who talk about reflection being one of the most powerful ways that we can be anti-racist or anti-misogynist or anti-homophobic or, you know, anti-Semitist, that we can start reflecting upon ways in which we might make a difference the next time. Because we can't always be, we aren't always going to be the most powerful, good person in the room. In fact, we might be the most scared person in the room, and that's okay too.
Okay. I had an experience. Okay.
Go ahead.
I had an experience a few years ago when I was working at Wilson Magnet High School in the library. A girl came in and needed some books on the Holocaust, and we started talking, and it came out I was Jewish. And then she made a comment that how she loved the Holocaust. And I had never heard anybody say that. I was so dumbfounded. I had a pause. I couldn't say anything. Then she looked at me and then realized that was not the thing to say. And what she said was, she was really glad to know that there were other groups in history that had suffered, and it wasn't just the African Americans. So by me pausing gave her a chance to reflect on what she was saying, and everything worked out. So sometimes you really need to know in the situation whom you're working with and what's in their thought processes.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think, Barbara, did you have something that you wanted to say also?
Yeah, I'm going to apologize in advance for my child that's running around outside.
So last year, my wife and I were walking and biking and running and ran into this man at the Genesee Valley Park, and we saw him 3 times, and he ended up jumping the bridge later that day. And I personally feel responsible for that, Angelique, like what you had mentioned. Like, I feel responsible because I saw him 3 times and he stood at the same spot, and I had that, this is really weird that you're just standing here and it's been over the course of 5 hours and you just keep looking down. And I just feel like I need to intervene. I feel responsible, and, you know, I feel like reflecting is good, but I feel that that's going to be, you know, I don't want that to be what's written on my tombstone. Like, I'm the person that doesn't intervene. And, you know, knowing the outcome of that is worse. But I know I should have done something.
Let me just, I'm going to end on that. Barbara, that's so traumatic. And I want to first say that I always have this, because we've got like 3.5 minutes left. I always have this conversation with my students about responsibility. And I ultimately ask them who's responsible and how much are those bystanders responsible for. And I don't do that to say that they are responsible. I do it to ask them to consider where we as humans naturally put that culpability. My students almost always say 100% responsible. The bystanders are responsible, 100. And then we start talking about all the scenarios, and sometimes they bring that down to 60%. Almost always, though, they believe that the bystanders 50% or more are responsible for any sort of event that happens. But I want to go back to the whole complexity of the conversation. It's not yes and no and right and wrong. Right. Sometimes I think that's the problem with us considering intervention and those sorts of things, is that it's not always you are responsible. If you didn't do the thing, it's your fault that it happened. So I'm here to tell you, if nobody said this to you, that's a horrific, horribly traumatic experience. And I'm so sorry you had to experience it. And you are not responsible for that moment.
I just want to squeeze in here at the end and say that when you talk about cost-benefit analysis, one of the things you have to think about is, are you actually accurate in determining what you think is your cost?
Right.
Because that's where white privilege, fear of Black people, all kinds of weird ass shit, pardon me, comes in. And I just think that's an important point when you're making your decisions.
Yep. Yeah. Did you want to talk, Jodi? No, I think I muted you. Can I unmute you?
Yeah, I can. Hold on. I just don't want to forget to show that slide if we can, and to thank Barbara for sharing that story.
Yes, I agree.
And Alice.
This went so fast.
I know, right?
We barely had enough time to go through everything. We had a great discussion. I want to just share this with you. Jodi, do you want to? Can you all see this?
Yep. Okay. We can. So the Levine Center and Monroe Community College is co-sponsoring this event coming up. It's a virtual event on November 16th at 7 p.m. We would love it if you would also attend. It's going to be a very good conversation about the inequality, of course, in our community now and in our world. So we'll send you more information if you registered for this. I know that Karen Elam is going to be able to give us the emails, and or we'll make sure that you have opportunity to join us on November 16th.
Okay, and so we'll be able to send out the link for that?
Yes.
Okay, well, our time is up. They're gonna share a little video with you.
Thank you so much for being here, everyone.
Thank you so much, everybody.